Title HOA locked me out of my own property. Finds out I own the entire water and power supply. I'll never forget the day I stood at the end of my own driveway, staring at a shiny new padlock on my gate. A gate I had paid for, on my land. The HOA president, a smug man named Roger, stood just behind it with his arms crossed, wearing that same arrogant smirk he always did when he thought he'd won. "Sorry, Nathan," he said. "Until your fees are settled and your violations are cleared, you don't get access." HOA rules. I wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of it all was beyond belief. I'd lived on that property for 8 years, built my home with my own hands, paid my dues every single month, and now these people were locking me out over a few made-up complaints about my solar panels and non-standard fencing. I clenched my fists. "Roger, you've crossed the line." He just shrugged. "You can appeal it in the next board meeting. That's in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 3 weeks without access to my house, my tools, my land, my life." But Roger didn't know something. Something I had kept quiet for years. You see, my late father used to be a civil engineer. Back when this area was still under county jurisdiction, he helped design the local water distribution network and a small private substation that powered our part of the valley. Before he passed, he transferred the management rights and ownership of both the water supply and that substation to me. So technically, the HOA's fancy homes, their fountains, their irrigation systems, and their clubhouse all depended on infrastructure I owned. And that's when I realized, if they wanted to play power games, I had more power than they'd ever imagine. That night, I parked my truck outside the locked gate and called a locksmith. Not for the gate, but for my office. I spent hours going through files, contracts, and maintenance agreements. Everything was legal, everything current. I wasn't just an owner. I was the sole supplier of utilities to the HOA district. By dawn, I had a plan. I didn't want revenge. What I wanted was respect, to make them understand that pushing people around has consequences. So I started with a simple, official-looking letter, one that I sent directly to the HOA office, to Roger's desk. Notice of temporary service suspension. Effective immediately. Due to unresolved property disputes and unpaid infrastructure usage fees, water and electrical services to the HOA district will be suspended for maintenance review. I signed it. Nathan Caldwell, utility owner and administrator. Within hours, my phone started buzzing nonstop. First, it was residents calling, furious about the water pressure dropping. Then came the messages about lights flickering and power outages across the community. By the time evening hit, Roger himself showed up at my gate. No smirk this time. He was sweating, panicked, his voice shaky. "Nathan, listen. There's been a misunderstanding. You can't just cut off the whole neighborhood." I leaned against the gate calmly. "Can I? My contract says I can suspend service for maintenance or policy disputes." "You locked me out of my home, Roger." "Consider this maintenance," he sputtered. "You're going to cause chaos." "We have families here." I looked him dead in the eye. "You should have thought about that before you padlocked my gate." For the first time since I'd moved there, Roger didn't have a comeback. He looked small, almost scared. The next morning, a special HOA meeting was called. Every resident was there, furious, but not at me. They were demanding answers from Roger and the board. When I arrived, I could feel the tension in the air. People whispered my name like I was some urban legend, the guy who shut off the water and power with a signature. Roger tried to control the room. "Everyone, please, we're handling it." "No, Roger," I interrupted. "You created it." I walked to the front, holding up the same letter I'd sent. "You locked me out of my home illegally. You violated property laws and you expected no one to fight back. Well, you were wrong. I don't just live here. I own the systems that keep this place running. So either we fix this today, or you all better start learning how to live off-grid." There was silence, then applause. One of the older residents, Mrs. Davenport, stood up. "Roger, we've had enough of your power trips. Nathan's right. We voted you in to manage the neighborhood, not control it." Within minutes, a motion to remove Roger was passed. The board voted him out. I restored power and water later that afternoon, Not because they begged, but because the new HOA board reached out respectfully. They offered to remove the lock, clear the bogus violations, and rewrite the bylaws to prevent abuse of authority. When I finally opened my gate again, it felt like crossing into peace. The air was quiet, the sun was setting, and my home stood waiting. Still mine, still strong. As I walked up the driveway, I thought of my father, how he always told me, true power isn't about control, it's about responsibility. Roger learned that lesson the hard way. And as for me, I learned that sometimes standing up for yourself doesn't mean fighting back harder. It means knowing when to remind people just who really keeps the lights on. Moral: never underestimate quiet strength. True ownership isn't about paperwork or titles. It's about integrity, respect, and the courage to defend what's rightfully yours.